lies. Not something you should take lying down. Or laying down. I can never keep those verbs straight. Anyway, I hope you're sitting down because today we're breaking down 5 huge writing lies that you may have been told and may still believe. So let's examine where the truth lies within these writing lies. Lie number 1, you absolutely must or should never do insert thing here. Absolutes are absolutely something you'll hear as a writer. Advice that says that something is always a bad or a good idea. That something will never work and you should never do it. For example, never use double negatives. There's all kinds of advice you'll commonly see presented in this way. Never use adverbs. Always avoid filter words. Never confuse the reader. Make sure you always engage the reader emotionally. Readers always hate prologues. You'll see this kind of no wiggle room writing advice all the time. Now, I myself have been guilty of talking about advice in this way from time to time. Being on the dark side of the force, I am contractually obligated to deal in absolutes, so it's not something I can really avoid. The truth is, while there's certain things in writing that generally, and when I say generally, I mean north of like 95% of the time, there's stuff that generally should not be done, stuff that you should generally avoid. But I would say there are very few things in writing where there is never a situation where they will work. Really great stories break really solid rules from time to time. I would leave you with one last caution though. If you want to do something that 95% of the time doesn't work, do make sure that the case you're using it in is within that 5% where it does work. Lie number 2 that you might still believe, that you should wait until you're good enough to start on your best ideas. You'll see advice from time to time that you should not start on a particular idea unless you are certain you can pull it off. A lot of beginners, especially, have this big idea for a novel, and they are sometimes encouraged not to start on that and to do something else instead. Now, there are some things that beginners should maybe not attempt. Trying to write a 15-book epic fantasy series as your first foray into writing is probably not a good idea. Maybe start with something a little bit smaller in scope first. And even the idea of a beginner tackling something long like a novel as their first go at writing might be a bad idea. I think where this advice falls apart is in the ideas or a specific story that you should or should not pursue. This notion that you might use up a good idea and then be kind of stuck is just really silly. As you grow and evolve as a writer, you're going to come up with better ideas that interest you more than the initial ideas that you had when you were starting out. And ultimately, ideas are really cheap. Everybody has plenty of ideas. Some of them are good, some of them are bad. It's your skill at executing that matters way more than the ideas that you execute on. This lie also gets to another problem, which is waiting around to start. The thing that wastes the most time in the world is people trying to not waste time and delaying action under the auspices of trying to do something in a more optimal way. You get better by taking action. You become ready and capable of doing something after you do the thing. Waiting around or preparing or trying to go about it without wasting any effort will never make you ready and you will never make progress. Don't delay in starting the projects you want to start. The scope of those projects should be in line with your skill and experience, but taking on challenges, things that are a little bit beyond your capabilities, is what makes you better at the end of the day. Next up, lie number 3, you must be inspired to write. Some people talk about the writing process as like being struck by lightning. It just randomly happens. There's this flash, and then you smell burning, and everything hurts. There's this idea out there that if you aren't in the right mood to write, then the writing you produce won't be good. That you should only write when you're inspired and the creative juices are flowing, lest you sully the page with uninspired drivel. There's an element of truth to this, The mood that you're in when you're writing definitely affects your writing, 100%. If you're having an off day or you aren't putting in a good effort, the writing may not live up to your skill level. Some days things work and some days things are bad. Every writer experiences this. You're going to have good days and you're going to have bad days. But what this advice misses is the thing you need to do is not wait around for these moods to strike. You need to work on your skill at cultivating these moods. The skill any writer needs to develop is the ability to bring that effort and that inspiration to the surface on days where it doesn't naturally appear. You need to learn to push through a bad writing day, to produce good writing, or at least writing that is as best as you can make it on that particular day, in spite of how you feel. On any given day, you are you. Inspired, not inspired, in the mood to write, not in the mood to write, you're still you. Doesn't really matter. Most of what blocks you when you don't feel inspired is just emotional garbage that's gumming up the works. You need to learn to clear that crap out so that you can write regardless of whether the muses or whatever are working on that day. The fact is, you will never reach your potential as a writer if you only write on the days where it's working. If you only write when you 100% really feel like writing, you're never going to come close to your potential. Yes, your mood and inspiration and good days and bad days will affect the writing, but you have to learn to move past that. Next up, lie number 4. Your first draft should be terrible. This one requires hella nuance, so pay attention. You'll commonly hear from most writers that first drafts are generally bad, and it is through revision and editing that the quality of a piece actually comes through and a story really begins to shine. This is true, 100% true. Revision and revising, which is the same thing, and editing is all very important. What this doesn't mean, though, is that you should set out to create a terrible first draft. What I think the advice about first drafts being terrible really misses, the nuance that's not captured in this advice, is the reason that a first draft is terrible. You should strive to make your first draft as good as you can. Anything that you write should be as good as you can make it. Now, big caveat here, good is not the same thing as perfect. Good is a reflection of your skills with 100% effort from you. That's how you make something that's good. Perfect is an impossible and misguided place that no one ever reaches and is really just a delaying tactic to not do work and to produce something that might not live up to all of your expectations 100%. The reason a first draft is terrible is not because you aren't putting effort into it. You should still strive to make it good. This is the nuance. A first draft should become terrible after you complete and start looking at it. If you write something that feels problem-free, but after rereading it a few months later or having a critique partner look it over, and suddenly all of these problems are jumping out at you, that's a great sign that you are now growing as a writer. You previously weren't aware of the flaws in the writing, but through improving your skills, you've now become aware of them. I know this is incredibly nuanced, and maybe I'm not explaining it correctly here, but the idea is you should not knowingly allow flaws to persist in a first draft. You should work to eliminate those flaws as you produce that draft in a way that maximizes your effort, but doesn't delay things unnecessarily and lets you slip into this realm of perfectionism. A first draft is not the time for excuses to let problems slip in, which I think a lot of people do when they hear this advice. They let themselves get lazy, they gloss over issues, they leave problems that they could have fixed if they put a little bit more effort into the first draft. At the same time, though, a first draft is not something that you should obsess over trying to get it perfect, because then you'll never finish it. Trying to thread the needle between completing something to the best of your ability and not being so perfectionistic that you can't actually make any progress is a very tricky and very nuanced path to walk. A first draft should seem terrible because you've developed as a writer, either because your skills generally have improved or you're seeing your story in a new light and you're seeing flaws in it that you didn't see while you were working on the first draft. A first draft should not be terrible because you just made a poor effort because everybody says first drafts are terrible, so I'm not going to put any effort in and I'm going to leave problems to deal with later on. That's not why a first draft should be terrible. And finally, the last lie that we'll talk about today, anything to do with talent or being born as a writer. Talent is a stupid concept. I don't doubt that there are people born with natural inclinations towards things like writing, and these people probably have a head start on the rest of us when it comes to writing skill. But the idea of talent itself misses so much of what's going on. Some people dismiss the notion entirely, which I think is valid. A lot of gifted writers out there have also spent decades writing and have millions of words worth of practice under their belt. Of course they're good. They spent literally years of their lives practicing this thing. Encouragement and environment also matter. A lot of successful writers show a spark of early skill and they get encouragement from people around them, and that encourages them to continue practicing, which drives more improvement. I don't consider myself to be an amazing writer by any stretch of the imagination, but the reason that I'm still writing into adulthood is probably due to the fact that my teachers and people who read my writing when I was a kid noticed that I was like maybe 10% better than average and told me I was good at writing. That's a major reason that I'm still writing. For some reason, people become obsessed with the idea of writers being born with this great talent and how they're this once in a generation god of the craft. I don't know why we find that interesting compared to someone who started out life as an average writer and just put in thousands of hours to get better and worked for every ounce of skill they have. Which I think, if you go and examine the evidence, is what a lot of gifted writers have actually done. Maybe it's because if practice is what makes people good, then anybody can become good if they put practice in, but putting practice in is really hard. So instead we attribute other people's success to these magical forces like talent, which absolves us of the realization that we too could be like them if we just put more work in and weren't as lazy. Writing is a skill. If you want to have that skill, you've got to write and you've got to practice. Focus on where your finish line is, not where your starting line or anybody else's starting line was. Speaking of finish lines, we've reached the finish line of this video. So there you have it. I'd love to hear about any writing lies that you want to dispel in the comments down below. As always, thanks for watching. If you want to see more stuff like this, you can check out all my other writing advice related videos and subscribe to my channel. I don't know why I was trying to say that so fast because I really messed it up. Anyways, thanks for watching and I will see you next time.